In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And with that single sentence, the stage is set for the most compelling story ever told. From the creation of the world, to the fall, to the flood, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, and to Joseph, these ancient stories carry profound truths that can shape our lives today. What are they saying? How are they prompting us to see our world? And what are they offering to us to help encounter the character of God? This is Genesis, the beginning of beginnings. We'll experience the story that started it all.
All right, well, as the video said, we are in the book of Genesis, and I just want to thank you for being a part of this journey. My name is Robert, and I have the joy of being the pastor here at Fellowship. And if you can find one of these Bibles around you, it might be in the chair in front of you, the chair behind you, somewhere in your vicinity, I'd like to encourage you, take this Bible and first pick it up, all right? And then secondly, we're going to open to Genesis chapter 13, which is where we're going to be. And then, if you really feel inclined, take this with you, and either it's yours to keep or it's yours to give away to somebody. Because I truly believe the Word of God changes lives. And so we are journeying through this story of Genesis, and as we've been doing so, we've been following a man by the name of Abram. You may know him more as Abraham, because eventually his name changes, but we have Abram here, and as we look at him, we're seeing this journey that he's been on. And this journey took him out of his homeland. It took him down to Egypt last week, and now we're going to see him coming out of Egypt. And as we begin to unpack and unravel this story and continue in this story, something came to mind. Now, I apologize that some of the illustrations are my life, because I just got to share it. And I got 2 boys at my house, right? Now, some of you might not relate to this because you don't have 2 boys at your house. Some of you are like me. When I grew up, I was an only child. I had no clue what siblings meant. I was the favorite. I was the most favorite child. I was the least favorite child. I was the child, right? And so you bring siblings in, and it was like my world changes. Because what often happens is the 2 siblings argue about who's the favorite. And if you are saying, yeah, maybe you were that sibling who argued with a sibling, or you've experienced it yourself. And over, Dad, that wasn't fair, whether it be a game of football in the front yard, or Dad, that wasn't fair, whether it be the thing that the one kid got that the other kid didn't get. And so we say something in my house all the time, fair isn't equal and equal isn't fair. But yet, no matter how much I say that, there is always this sibling rivalry that takes place. There's always this love-hate relationship that takes place. There's a comparison that takes place between the 2. And some of you are like, yep, my siblings and I, we're perfect. Or you're like, I'm an only child, don't have to worry about it. But for all of us, the same can be true. Because we compare to others around us time and time again. We compare our jobs. We compare our homes. We compare our mortgages, their rates. We compare our marriages. We compare our ministries. We compare our bank accounts. We compare our influence. The list can go on and on. Before long, comparison turns into competition, and people that we were once friends with now become enemies. What used to be peaceful now becomes a place of tension. And this is exactly what's happening in Abraham's story. His family gets caught up in division, but underneath is something deeper. And it's God trying to teach Abraham what faith really looks like. We're going to dig in to see that Abraham has a lot of stuff. His family members have a lot of stuff. And all of that stuff becomes a giant headache for both of them. But let's start in Genesis 12 before we get to Genesis 13. The Lord, this is Genesis 12, verse 1, so you see that big number 12 right next to it. The Lord said to Abram, "Leave your native country, your relatives, your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." Many of us know this. Many of us have heard this. We've been preaching through this. But what it says is, I want you to leave. I want to leave your family, your father, and I want you to leave everything that you have behind you. If I were to summarize it, that's what it's saying. And when you finally let go of that stuff, I will bless you. And oftentimes, we read the next verse, and we congratulate Abram on his big step of faith. Wow, what he did. Wow, all the things he left behind. Wow, look at what Abram did. But I want you to catch something in verse 4 here that is so important. So Abram departed just as the Lord had instructed. He departed, he left as the Lord told him to leave. And who went with him? Lot. All of a sudden, this Lot goes with him. God never said to bring Lot, did he? God didn't even say to bring his wife Sarai, did he? God didn't say to bring his stuff with him, did he? Abram departed as God told him to depart, but he brings stuff with him as well. He doesn't go all in departing. He departs, but he brings stuff with him. This is key to our understanding of the text in chapter 13, because Lot goes with him. God specifically said, leave your family. Did he not in verse 1? And Abram said, okay, Lord, but I'll bring my nephew. Now you could say, well, there's reasons he brought his nephew. His nephew didn't have a father. His father died, and so he was an orphan. And so because he was an orphan, wasn't he doing the right thing by bringing him with him? Wasn't he being caring? And did God say to do that? No. And how often can we get caught up in this same situation where we think we have to be the Savior? Because I think that's what Abram is thinking is happening here. I got to bring Lot with me because I have a whole list of reasons why. And God never told him to, though. But there's this lack, maybe, and I might be reading into it, but this lack of trusting that God would truly take care of Lot. And so he chooses to bring Lot with him. And so many times, I think we can be just like this. Lord, I'll obey you, but there's one thing I got to take care of first. Lord, I'll follow you, but there's this one thing I just won't let go of. It's like this, God, I'm in, but I'm not all in. I'm in because I should be in. I want the fire insurance of being in. I like the idea of being in, but there's a few things I want to keep with me. That's Abram. There's a few things. I'm going, God. I'll depart, but I got a few things. And this is the tension that carries us through chapter 12 and into chapter 13. All the things that Abram holds on to are the things that become tensions for him. Last week we looked at his wife Sarai, because it says in verse 5, he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth. He brings three things with him. He brings his wife, his nephew, and his wealth. His livestock and all the people had taken from the household of Haran, and he headed to the land of Canaan when they arrived. As we look at chapter 12, we see these three things he brings with him. But here's the thing. His wife Sarai becomes his struggle in Egypt, doesn't it? Now he doesn't know how to negotiate going to Egypt and what to do with her. So sadly, he comes up with this plan to say, oh, well, she's just my sister. His nephew, Lot, becomes our tension in chapter 13. And with Lot also becomes the tension of possessions. These things that he brought with him are the headaches that he then has to face. And I can't help but think of Jesus teaching very similar ways when he's with this rich young ruler. And it's in a conversation with the rich young ruler that Jesus says, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and then come follow me. The next verse says that he was sad because he had great wealth. What Jesus is saying is not go sell your house, bankrupt your 401k, go give it all up. He might be saying that, but what he's saying is, are you all in for me or not? Or are you holding on to the securities of this world, not trusting that I will get you through it? This is a teaching that Abram experienced in Genesis, that the rich young ruler is having to face in his life, and guess what? You and I have to face in our lives as well. The question we have to ask as we enter our text is this: what are we still holding on to? There's something that's causing headaches in our life. And I believe often we give Satan way too much credit for those headaches. And often we blame God too much for those headaches, when those headaches were really created by us, because we brought stuff with us. Abram had escaped a very scary situation last week. He ticked off the leader of Egypt. Think about that. I would not want to upset any world leader, let alone the most powerful one at the time, being Pharaoh. Probably not a smart move, but he did it. And it may seem that except for the emotional damage that he did to his wife, because, that had to have been scarring, he's better off than he was before. Because he gets more stuff, he gets out of the land, he escapes the famine, he has his wife back. It's like Abram sitting there and he's like, yeah, you know what, I messed up, but look at what I got. Look at all this stuff that I got, even though I wasn't quite all in. I find it interesting because sometimes we go through life and we have that same feeling. Man, I messed up a little bit, but I came out ahead because of it. Wow, that mistake, but man, look at what I got. And sometimes we celebrate a little bit too early. Sometimes we run from things. I often say when we're trying to go through turmoil in our life, to not run from the problem, because the problem's just going to follow you. And it's going to be at the next place, and the next place, and until we actually confront it, nothing will change. Well, guess what happens to Abram? It's right here in Genesis 13, verse 1. So Abram left Egypt. He was down in Egypt. He gets his wife back. He gets more possessions. He even has camels now. Think about this. The guy is living the high life. And he traveled north into Negev, along with his wife and Lot and all they owned. I love verse 2, puts it, Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. He had it all. From the Negev, they continued traveling by stages toward Bethel, and they pitched their tents between Bethel and Ai, where they had camped before. Did you catch those words? Where they had camped before. God did what to him? He brought him right back to where he was before. He says, look, I'm going to do it again. We're going to go back up to this worship tour that you were on. Remember, he was going city to city, building altars, worshiping God, saying how great he was, carrying all this stuff he brought with him. He goes down to Egypt, and God's saying, now what are you going to do? What are you going to do now that you're out of Egypt, back in this land? He has something he has to figure out. He's back to this land, he's back to this place, and he's better off than he was before when it comes to a worldly status, is he not? He has more stuff, and he didn't lose anything. Pretty good transaction. Seems up and to the right if we're looking at our financial charts. He comes back to where he was building altars and worshiping God, and he has even more stuff to do it with. And to many of us, we'd look at this and we'd say, wow, what a blessing. What a blessing. Yet what we can call a blessing is actually sometimes a burden. And that's what we see happen next. It's in verse 5. Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had also become very wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats and herds of cattle and many tents. I find it funny, the way we define wealth then versus wealth now, anyways. No bank accounts, just how many goats do you have? Can you imagine the comparison game? Anyways. But the land could not support both Abram and Lot with all their flocks and herds living so close together. I mean, they're just jam-packed with animals. They're living the life. So disputes broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. You see what's happening? They got a bunch of stuff. And now that they have a bunch of stuff, what's starting to take place? They're starting to argue because of all their stuff. Abundance here is actually creating division rather than unity. Come on. If you've ever been in a dispute over an estate with a family member, you thought you were great family members. You thought you were best friends. And then all of a sudden you open up that trust or that will. And I've heard story after story of how many times the gloves come off and the fists start going. How many times people hold on to things. And all of a sudden, the idea of abundance or more creates strife rather than creating unity and peace. We see this happening among all their stuff. They're crowded, they can't fit, there's so many people, and now they're just arguing with each other. And all of this, if we were to look back, was Abram bringing Lot with him so that he could help him. And now they're at odds. He wanted to trust God, yet the stuff he clung to is giving him headaches. Fear and famine got in the way in Egypt, and stuff and good intentions are getting in the way now. Yet all of this is important for God to get Abram to the place he wanted him to be. Have many of you ever played tug of war? I think today we should probably have a tug of war game. I'm just going to throw that out there. No, I'm just kidding. But when you play tug of war, have you ever been there and you're tugging? And first off, you got to have that good anchor, all right? So you get the good anchor, the other team has the good anchor, and you're tugging and you're tugging and you're tugging, but you feel like you're going nowhere. Ever been there? And all that force and all that work and all that effort leads to zero movement. What happens when you let go of that rope? They completely fall, and everyone falls down. You know, life is often like that. We're tugging on that rope, we're striving for things, we're fighting for things, we're looking at people, and we're in this tug-of-war battle. But sometimes God is saying, are you ready to let go of the rope and stop trying to win on your own? I see this with Abram. He's pulling, trying so hard, trying to figure out all these family dynamics. He's clinging to the rope that's burning in his hands. And that's where some of us are living right now. We're clinging to this rope. But the turning point is never when we pull harder, it's when we let go. And this is what we see in verse 8 of Genesis 13. Abraham finally stops pulling. He finally opens his hands. And he actually chooses humility over control, peace over pride, and faith over fighting. I love this because look at what verse 8 says. Finally. That word there is saying that finally he got it. Finally it clicked. Finally he had enough. Finally he came to the place where he says, I've learned the lesson. And some of us need that word finally. Like, finally I'm going to give up all this stuff. Because what does he do? Finally Abram said to Lot, let's not allow conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. After all, we are close relatives. Let's just stop the fighting. If you've ever been in a fight with someone, there comes a point where someone has to say stop. And when you finally say stop, you don't want to. Nothing inside you wants to, but it's the only way to lead to peace. And finally, Abram comes to the place where he says, stop. But what I see next isn't him just saying stop, because I think that's great. Time out. Done fighting. 5 minutes later. But I want everything my way. Blah, 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 blah. Don't you see how I'm right? No. He says, time out, stop. And then look what happens in verse 9. The whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, I'll take the land to the right. If you prefer the land to the right, I'll go to the left. Abram comes to a place where he says, you know what? Let's stop the fighting. And how about Lot, you choose what you want? It's a pretty big deal. He's not controlling the situation anymore. He's not trying to dictate what happens next. He's not devising a plan of his own. He says, you know what? Stop. Lot, and you go where you want to go, and I'll take the leftovers. How many of us are really willing to get there in our faith? Because it's when we get there in our faith where we say, I don't need to control it anymore, that we actually allow God to work in ways that only God can. Abram releases or relinquishes all control. And I don't think this is a sign of weakness, which many of us would say, well, look, he's just caving. Believe it's a sign of faith. Because it takes more strength to release than it does to cling to. We think that when we cling to it, we're showing our macho-ness or our strength or our bravado. But when we release it, we show so much more strength. Because it takes a humble position to do that. Abram is learning what God's promise requires, and it doesn't require his control, it requires his trust. If he truly wants the promise of God and the ways of God, he has to trust God. And so I want you to see what happens next. When Abram lets go, Lot grabs on. But Lot grabs onto the wrong thing. Abram lets go, he lets Lot make a choice, and then Lot chooses the wrong things. He lifts his eyes and he looks what's good, the well-watered plains near Sodom, the land that man's building, and not God's promise. And what we see in the text is that Abram's humility leads to God's land, where Lot's own choosing leads to man's buildings and man's evilness and his wickedness. This is what it says. Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley in the direction of Zoar. It wasn't like a short look. It wasn't a brief look. He looked at it. He said, all right, if I want to go east, I can go east. If I want to go west, I can go west. What do I want? The whole area was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord or the beautiful land of Egypt. Verse 11, Lot chose for himself the whole Jordan Valley to the east of them. He went there with his flocks and servants and parted company with his uncle Abram. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot moved his tents to the place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain. Verse 13, but the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against the Lord. There's a passage that talks about Abraham's faith. It's Hebrews chapter 11. If you're ever wanting to just go through a book of the Bible and just kind of even a chapter, I think Hebrews 11 is a great place because it's just the story of faith. It just shares all these different people and the things that they did of faith. But this is what it says about Abram. It was Hebrews 11, verse 8, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as in his inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. And even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith, for he was like a foreigner living in tents. And so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. But then verse 10 is the one that I always wonder, why did the author put it in? And it'll make sense in a second. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. His gaze was on something different. It wasn't on what man could build. It was on what God would build. So let's go to Genesis 13, verse 12. It tells us that Abram settled in the land of Canaan. And Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom and settled among the cities of the plain. If you look at this verse, chapter 13, verse 12, it makes something clear. Abram settled in the land, and Lot moved where? Among the cities. If we look at it in the Hebrew, this is the land that was created by God. It's the place that only God can create. It's ground that only comes from God's own creation. He's among the land and the ground, that which is established by God. And where does Lot move to? That which was established by man. There's a big difference between the two lands. Verse 13 even tells us that the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against God. And so that brings us to a life lesson. What looks good to man isn't always best for God. Lot got to choose where he went, did he not? And if I'm Lot, I'm just thinking, I'm choosing what looks better, what looks more fertile, what looks like it's going to sustain, what looks like I'm going to have victory in it, or it's going to be long-lasting. And he chooses what looks successful in that he chooses cities built by man. And then Abram, he gets the leftover, which is no city and just the land. This phrase is so powerful to me because what happens next is we see Abram begin to grow in this faith, in this understanding. In verse 14, after Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, finally his possessions, it's all gone. The Lord speaks to Abram and he says, look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I am giving you all this land as far as you can see, to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you as many descendants like that of the dust of the earth. They cannot be counted. And then verse 17, go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. I just see him looking at this land and God saying, look, I have given you this. I have given you this land, and you didn't choose it, but it was chosen for you. And then he says to go and walk the land. A better translation would go and take a stroll. There's two ways you can walk. The first way you can walk is with the idea that I'm getting from point A to point B, and nothing's getting in my way. This is like a cold winter day, and you're like tunnel vision. I'm just going. Like, you're not getting in my way. Point A, point B, I'm going. And even I'm speed walking, all right? Like, don't even stop me. That's one way to walk. The second way to walk is like walking when you're just enjoying the day. You're not worried about how many steps you're getting in. You're not worried about the end goal. You are just enjoying it. Last October, we had some meetings with our conference out in Vancouver. And so I had an early morning flight, and it's a 3-hour time difference, right? And I didn't get picked up till like 5 or 6 at night. It was something ridiculous. So that's like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock our time. And they booked the flight for me. So I had no control over this, right? And I'm thinking, what am I going to do in this city that I don't know for an entire day? Like, what am I going to do? I have an agenda. I have places to go. I mean, I left my family. I left things like to be at these meetings. Like, what am I going to do with these days? And so I found that you could take your luggage to a locker. And so I go into this weird party store, and I just trust them with my luggage. I don't know why. I give it to them, and then they charge me to trust them with it. So I do that, and then for the next several hours, I just walk, and I ride a bike, and I go get lunch. And I look at the end of the day, and my watch told me I did over 5 hours of working out on a day that I just flew 5 hours. But I didn't feel like I worked a single second. When I looked at it, the pastor I was with, we strolled over 30 miles of Vancouver, saw the beautiful parks, got to see the different pictures, and what seemed like, what am I going to do with my time, turned into being an adventure around the city. When I see him looking at the town, this is what I see. God is saying, just go take a stroll. No agenda, nothing in mind, just go and walk and see. And notice what I am giving you. But this land becomes even more important because, like the ark became a means to protect Noah and his family, the land becomes an ark for God's people. And once again, God is providing a way. Throughout the scriptures, we're going to come back to this because there's a promise of a people and a land, and this starts to occur. As Christians, we cannot afford to overlook the importance of this. We come back to this land a lot because here's the thing. If you turn on the news, people are still waging war over this land. And people wonder, and I often been asked the question, why is this land, Israel, important? And different theologians take different ways around it. But I'm one who maybe call me simple-minded, maybe call me practical. I'm the first to admit I wasn't the greatest student in seminary. But when I read something and I see what God says, I believe it. And I want you to see verse 15. I'm giving all this land as far as you can see to you, your descendants, as a permanent possession. And when I read that, I think permanent means permanent. And I've read every translation, and I've tried to understand the different translation, and what I see as I read it is God saying, I've given you this land, and I've given you a people. And as Christians, we cannot forsake the fact that Jesus, our Messiah, came with a Jewish ancestry, that there's a Jewish bloodline and a Jewish promise that has always continued. And while we may be Gentile, there is something important about this land and this people to us. When we jump ahead of time, it's hard not to marvel at what has happened in this land. It was in the 1800s that Mark Twain went on a journey, traveling. And you didn't have Instagram stories or TikTok or ways that you kind of shared your vlog, however you want to do it. You wrote. And Mark Twain writes about his time in Italy, and he writes about his time in different places in Europe. And it's in his book, An Innocents Abroad, from 1867, that he writes, Palestine is desolate and unlovely. This land, he writes about, this promised land, seems desolate and unlovely. Throughout time, we've seen that when God's ways are being honored there, the land is full of richness and goodness. And when God seems to be removed from it, it seems to be desolate and nothing to worry about. Yet this land is fought for in the news today. And I believe it's because the fight is over who's entitled to the permanent possession of it. I'd love to talk more about this, and we'll keep coming back to it. But all I'll say is this. Isaiah 66:8 asks the question in regards to Israel, has a nation ever been born in a single day? And it was on May 14th, 1948, that the nation of Israel was born on a single day. And ever since that day, we have had, for the first time in history, the church in Israel trying to figure out what this looks like. And it's confused theologians, it's confused pastors, it's confused Christians. But all I know is on May 15th, the very next day, war began. And I have to ask myself the question, why? In a land that nobody wanted, in a land that was desolate, why does war have to wage over it? And while we will come back to this, what it shows me in history, what it shows me with Abraham in our story, what the history of Israel and Abraham show or reveal is that God uses the least of these over and over again. What looks like an afterthought is really God's plan. Abraham got the second choice, not the first choice. And if we look at the nations around him, Egypt and Babylon and all that could have been, Abraham wasn't much compared to those nations, was he? And Israel has never been much compared to the rest of the world, whether it be in size and stature. Yet both were and are used by God. And so what does that mean for us? Faith lets go of what man builds to walk toward what God promises. Faith lets go of what man builds to walk toward what God promises. Abraham's story is more than an ancient history lesson. It's a mirror. Because like Abram, we've all had moments where we've grabbed the rope, trying to hold on to control, to comfort, and to what is safe or fair. And like Abram, we've discovered that the harder we pull, the more exhausted and divided we become. But faith doesn't win by pulling harder. Faith wins by letting go. It's when Abram finally loosened his grip and he said, Lot, you choose and I'll trust God, that things change. That's the moment when heaven steps in. That's when God said, now look, now walk, now see what I have been giving you all along. The truth is that Lot looked up and he saw what looked good, the cities of man. Abram looked up and his eyes found what was truly good, the land of God. Lot settled near where people built, and Abram walked in what God had promised. And so I come back to Hebrews 11:10. Abram was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. We have to ask the question, what are we looking for? What is our end goal? Is it for the things built by man, or is it the things built by God? A life of faith is not about grasping on and holding to what is man-made. It's about trusting what only God can build. So here's my question. What are we still holding on to? What hope, what rope are we still pulling on? The one burning in our hands and stealing our peace. Is it a relationship that we're trying to control? Is it a future we're trying to secure? Is it a blessing that we're trying to manufacture? Maybe God's invitation today is not for you to pull harder on the rope. Well, if they just had one more conversation and understood, and we start pulling. Oh man, if I just do this and do that, then God will bless me, and we start pulling. Maybe He's not calling you to pull anymore. Maybe He's calling you to let go. Because when you let go of what's man-made, you finally make room for what God can build. So I want you to picture Abram standing there, the dust of the desert on his sandals, the rope finally dropped on the ground, his hands open, and God saying, walk through the land, it's yours. Don't sprint through it. Don't strive through it. Just stroll through it. Not chasing the blessing, but walking with the blesser. My challenge, church, is where are we at in our life? Let go of the rope. Put yourself in the presence of the Lord and say, Lord, have your way. I love praying the Lord's Prayer, and I'm going to pray it as we conclude because I think it speaks to it. It says, your kingdom come and your will be done. What do we need to let go of? What do we need to put into God's hands? And so I'm going to pray the Lord's Prayer over us and just pray that it blesses us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.